we need to start to blueprint the world that we want to live in and show it to people so they get excited about it. The way Walt Disney used to show people every Sunday night on the wonderful world of Disney. Here's what Disney World's going to look like. It's going to have Epcot, and it's going to have these lakes, and it's going to have these hotels. It's going to be amazing. And you just got so excited about Disney World. We need to start to get excited about World instead of this just heavy guilt laid on us about how, we must do this. It's our moral responsibility to do this. How about it would be joyful? It would be cool. It would be incredible to have a world that works for everyone.
You don't really know who you are or what you are until you put a really big challenge in front of you.
Fear is an asset and ally here to help you be magnificent.
This crazy, silly, stupid idea to run across the Sahara Desert.
You did make it this time, but you said if you didn't make it, you would try again and again.
Everybody's connected to nature, connected to music, to their families, and now we're going to build a world that doesn't have racism and war and starving kids.
I kept telling myself, run at me and just keep smiling.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome back to The Extra Mile. My name is Gene Gurkoff. Before we get into today's interview with Dan Pallotta, and it's a really great interview, I want to give you a quick heads up. I recorded this interview on June 4th, 2020, just earlier this afternoon. And as you know, we're going through some very challenging times in our country right now. And, I always record my interviews outdoors on a walk or a run. In pre-coronavirus times, I would do that in person with my guests, but lately I've been using the Zoom app to do that. And, when I do that, I want you to hear and feel the sounds of what's going on around me so that you can feel like you're walking or running with me and the guest. And, these days in New York City, we have a lot of protests going on, and by me, they've been peaceful protests, which is great. And you're going to get to hear a little bit of that in today's interview. You might hear some helicopters overhead. You might hear some sirens, a lot of commotion and traffic and people around us. And, I'm really glad. I want you to, like I said, feel and hear and feel like you're walking along with me today. It's an important moment in history, and I'm glad that I'm kind of able to record that moment in history to a small extent on this podcast. So without any further ado, turn up your volume and turn on your charity miles and come along for the walk or the run with me and Dan Pallotta. Every mile matters. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm good, Gene. How are you?
I am doing good, thanks. Interesting days we live in. How are things up in Topsfield, Massachusetts?
Well, we get all the same news as everyone else, but the surroundings are a little quieter. So, not dealing with the physical reality of police and boarded up stores and civil unrest, but certainly dealing with coronavirus and everything else.
Yep. I remember when we recorded our last podcast, it was beautiful up there, beautiful town that you live in. And if I recall, it's the oldest running fair in the country. Is that true? Did I get that right?
Good memory. The Topsfield Fair is the oldest operating fair in America. I think it's been going since sometime in the 1800s. So that happens in the fall, and they're determined to keep it going this fall. We'll see what happens. Massachusetts has been pretty conservative about things,
Yeah, I was wondering about that, if they'd be able to keep it going. I recorded a podcast this morning with Dave McGillivray, who's the race director for the Boston Marathon, which for the first time had to be canceled. So I was wondering about the Topsfield Fair. They'd be able to keep their streak going. Anyway, I'm really excited to talk with you today. I saw what you posted on LinkedIn, a few weeks ago, that you've been coming out with this new idea called Power Tools and a new book, The Everyday Philanthropist, which I ordered right away and have read a couple times. You could read the whole thing in 30 minutes. And, usually in a podcast, they wait to the end to ask the guest to plug their book. But I want to get right into it. I want you to plug your book right up front because I think everybody needs to read this book, especially our members, and we should be telling everyone about it. So let's get into it. Actually, also for the people who haven't gotten to meet you yet, if you can give a little background on yourself and what led you to the Everyday Philanthropist and your power tools.
Yeah, well, the Everyday Philanthropist is a book about a different way of thinking about giving and contribution than the traditional way that we've been taught. And I think, if these times teach us anything, they are that we need a stronger civil society, that we need a more engaged citizenry if we're going to really tackle the great social problems that confront us. And protest and demonstration is powerful, but what happens when the protest and the demonstration is over? How do we create lasting, fundamental change? And that's going to require more than a great president, more than the right Congress. It's going to require that all of us become leaders and participants in making this a better democracy and a more exciting and a more vibrant and a more innovative and a more ingenious society. And the nonprofit sector is a big part of the way we're going to accomplish that. And it doesn't get talked about enough. Before the virus, when we had the Democratic presidential debates and everybody was together debating, they talk about the great problems that confront this country. They talk about inequity, and they talk about poverty, and they talk about hunger, and they talk about illiteracy, but no one talks about the nonprofit sector. And the nonprofit sector is the apparatus by which you are going to solve these problems. Even if you put money into it, you're going to have to contract at a significant level with nonprofit organizations to deal with the more complicated nature of these problems. And we need more giving to the sector. But we need a different kind of giving, because the way everybody's been taught to give to charity smartly, right, is look for the charities that have the low overhead. Make sure you don't get the wool pulled over your eyes. Make sure you don't get conned by these high overhead charities. Find out what their overhead is and find out what they pay their CEO. And if they don't pay their CEO very much, and they don't have high overhead, then you've found a good charity. Well, think about that for a second. Seriously. CEO who isn't paid very much. You think you've just found a great organization, huh? Is that the way the Yankees or the Red Sox or the Patriots or the Giants look at things, No, they say, I want you to go find the best quarterback that money can buy, the best pitcher that money can buy, the best coach that money can buy, so we can win the World Series, so we can win the Super Bowl. Why would we have a different attitude toward winning the battle against cancer and poverty and illiteracy? We need great people. We need the best people that money can buy and that society has to offer to orchestrate the solving of these great problems. So I think when you're looking for the bottom of the barrel on price with respect to CEO salaries, you're going to get what you pay for. And then with respect to overhead, well, what is overhead exactly? Is it waste? No, it's not waste. Some of it is the fundamental stuff an organization needs to operate, like keep the lights on in the building and pay basic salaries and pay the receptionist. But the even more important part of overhead is fundraising. And we've all been taught charities that spend money on fundraising, those are wasteful charities. I don't want to give any of my money to fundraising. Well, what is fundraising? Fundraising is the charity going out and finding other donors so that they don't have to rely on you all the time, more and more and more. And if we don't get more people involved, if we don't find more donors, we're never going to solve these problems because we'll never raise enough money to solve them. So if you want to be the only donor, if you want the charity to be wholly dependent on you and the few other people that are involved with that charity, then restrict them from spending money on fundraising. But if you want to see them grow, if you want to see other people become part of the game so that they can really solve these problems, then you should encourage them to spend money on fundraising. If they spend money on, like, I created these incredible events called the Breast Cancer 3 Days. We started those events with $350,000. Now, if you had been a wealthy donor and you said, I'm going to give 350 grand to breast cancer, and I want it all to go to the best breast cancer researcher, and I want it to all go to research, and I don't want any of it spent on overhead or anything else, you would have gotten $350,000 worth of breast cancer research. Great. But if you gave it to us and you put it into the breast cancer 3 days and the development of that business, that revenue generator, we turned that into $194 million in 5 years, net, after all expenses. Because we found more donors. We used that money to excite people to get involved in the breast cancer cause. So you could have spent your 350 grand on $350,000 worth of breast cancer research, or you could have spent it on generating $194 million worth of breast cancer research. And you've got to ask yourself, which do I prefer? Do I just want to feel good, or do I want to produce a result in the world?
Right. Well, you've covered a lot there, and there's so many different points that you brought up there that I want to hopefully dive a little bit deeper into. Maybe I'll start with what you said at the beginning, which is if this whole experience over the last several months has taught us anything, is that we need a much stronger civil society, and the nonprofit sector is a big part of how we do that. You know, I feel like we showed up for this race untrained. Like when the coronavirus happened, if we had, you know, a stronger healthcare system, which is both a product of our politics, our nonprofit sector, and our, you know, the way that we personally take care of ourselves, then maybe we wouldn't have been hit as hard. And I'm curious if the way that we've been experiencing the coronavirus has changed or deepened, or in any other way kind of expanded your thought on the role of the nonprofit sector in that kind of equation of how we can strengthen our civil society.
Well, if you look at coronavirus, what are its most damaging effects? Its most damaging effects, aside from on the elderly, and there's not much we can do about that other than social distancing and finding the right medical therapies. Its most damaging effects have been on the poor, the people who didn't have any savings, the people who can't afford to live in their apartments, the people who are food insecure, the people who had no money for food to begin with other than their paycheck and now are relying on food pantries. So this is the kind of society you get when you don't have a strong nonprofit sector eradicating and addressing these problems on the scale at which they exist. And, you know, we have a society that is addicted to consumption. Why is it addicted to consumption? Is it because people are selfish? Is it because human beings are evil? No, I don't think that at all. I think people are beautiful. I think people are graceful, and I think they want to help others. But you spend a lifetime in a laboratory experiment where you're indoctrinated all day long, over and over again and over again, on your computer and on the radio and on television and in magazines and in newspapers, with messages about consume Apple products, consume Frito-Lay products, consume Coca-Cola products, consume Budweiser, consume alcohol, consume Princess Cruises, consume Disney products, inundated over and over and over since the time you were a kid with messages to consume, and you very rarely hear a message about compassion. Well, you're just naturally going to want to consume. So we need a society where there's a lot more invitation to be compassionate, and those invitations have to come from nonprofit organizations, and somebody has to fund them. And donors can fund them. You know, the way we got so many people to walk in the breast cancer 3 days and ride in the AIDS rides is we took out big ads, full page, full color on Sunday in the New York Times. That cost a lot of money, but it generated a huge amount of money. And that was the beginning of a balancing. You know, okay, if Singular Wireless at the time can have full page ads, and if Nokia can have full page ads, and Chevy can have full page ads, and Heineken can have full page ads, why can't breast cancer have a full page ad? Why can't AIDS have a full page ad? You know, now in that case, it was once in a year. You know, Budweiser gets a full page ad every single day. So we've got a long, long, long way to go. But the structures in our society we keep looking for some magic, you know, what's the thing that's going to turn the world around? Well, what's the thing that's going to make the world more compassionate? The same thing that's made the world more consumptive. We invest in it massively. And if we don't start to invest in habituating the public toward compassion, we're going to have the same imbalance.
Have you seen, I mean, it seems like, anyway, over the last few months that people are feeling more compassionate. I mean, every ad on TV is a company basically showing its compassion about its, you know, that we thank the first responders. Companies are coming out in force to kind of show their compassion. I think people are, now that we've had this pause, or maybe rethinking their own priorities about what matters to them in their life, and even, you know, rediscovering the simple joys of going for a walk, spending time with your family, caring for others. Are you seeing that? Like, how can we use this moment so that it's not just a moment?
Well, it will be just a moment unless we habituate people toward a different way of being. Now, we're being habituated right now toward a different way of being. But once there's a vaccine and we're able to go to restaurants again, and, you know, the protests and the riots are over, there's a human tendency to go right back to the way things were. And you hear this cry for normalcy. But even in the examples you bring up, we let companies, right? You see all these companies, like Tim Cook today at Apple issued a big statement, and they'll probably run ads talking about racism. So not only do we allow Apple to spend money advertising iPhones, we let Apple spend money advertising social justice, but we don't let social justice organizations spend money advertising social justice, and they're the ones we need to support. So we have no idea who the social justice organizations even are. We have no excitement about supporting them and funding them so that they can grow to be the size of Apple. You know, we don't have a problem with everyone having an iPhone. Jesus, the poorest of the poor in the world have smartphones, but they don't have food because, you know, we've let the for-profit sector, we've given them this massive economic freedom to put products and services into people's hands, but we restrict the economic freedoms of nonprofits because we've been taught that the wrong things are wasteful. We've been taught, hey, I'm looking for that charity where 95% of the money goes to the cause. Okay, great. Let's say you find the charity where 95% of the money goes to the cause. How on earth do you know they're not wasting that 95% just because it goes to the cause? How do you know what they're spending it on? How do you know how good their staff is, how high quality the programs are? That's like going into the shoe store and saying, bring me the Nikes with the lowest overhead. I don't want to see them. I don't want to try them on. Just put them in a box, and as long as they have low overhead, I'm buying them. You would never do that, right? But that's how you buy charity. I want the ones with the lowest overhead. I don't care if they're not doing any good, is essentially what you're saying. Now, the public doesn't realize they're saying that because we've taught them that low overhead charities are the best charities. So they think, you know, hey, that's what they've told me, so they must be the good ones. It's not true. You've got to look at other things. You've got to look at what are the charities' goals? Do they have big goals? Are they up to something big into the world? Are they putting their rear ends on the line for some big accomplishment? Are they holding themselves accountable to something? Do they have an innovative methodology? Do they do it really well? Do they gather data? Do they measure how well they're doing the way Elon Musk measures the data, every piece of data on the Falcon rocket and the Crew Dragon space capsule so that they can iterate and improve it? Does the charity you're interested in do that? That's what you want to know.
So that brings me kind of the next line of questioning, which I appreciate you leading me into, is, all right, so looking at overhead and looking at CEO salary and looking at what they spend on advertising isn't the right way to evaluate a charity. Your book talks about the 3 questions that you should ask in how you evaluate a charity. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, you know, number one, I should plug it because you know you'll forget, your listeners will forget everything they heard me say here. So you should buy the Everyday Philanthropist. You can buy it on Amazon, or you can go to danpallotta.com. Either way, and it you know, if you read it really slowly and carefully, it reads in an hour. It's 32 little micro chapters. It's got big graphics that explain everything. It's written for the average person to become an extraordinary donor. So, and it'll tell you what questions you should ask. And you should ask the charity, what are your goals? What progress are you making toward those goals, and how do you improve? And you can ask those in a methodical way in the book.
Can you say those again just so it sinks in?
Yeah. What are your goals? Number one.
What are your goals?
Number two, what progress are you making toward those goals? And you might not be making any progress. That's okay. I want to know, you get difficult problems you're trying to solve. Jonas Salk didn't come up with a vaccine for polio the first go around. What I want to know is what progress are you making or not making? And then how do you improve? How do you know if you're making progress? And how do you try to make more progress?
Those are three good questions. So yeah, let's talk about like how do you know if a charity's got worthwhile goals? Like if you ask a charity what their goals are, what do you look at to make sure that, okay, those are goals that are worth me getting behind?
Here's what you use. You use a tool that every human being was born with, your gut and your excitement level. Like when Elon Musk says, I want to colonize Mars and I want to do it in my lifetime. And here's the booster rocket technology we're going to use to do it. And here's the rocket that we're testing to go to the International Space Station as a precursor of that. Does that excite you? Excites me. Man, you want to colonize Mars? Really? That's a big goal. And you have legitimate reason to say that you could do it. You know, is the charity that you're talking to, are they telling you, well, our goal, last year we raised $1 million. Our goal next year is to raise $1.5 million. Well, how does that solve any problem? I don't know what you're spending the money on. That's a self-referential goal. But if you tell me, like, say, No Kid Hungry, our goal is to end child hunger in America by the year 2030, 10 years from now, man, I'm with you. I'm with you. What's your plan? And they'll tell you your plan. Are they up to something as big as what Apple and Facebook are up to? Because that's what we need. Life is short. People are suffering. We don't have 100 years to solve these problems. Is the charity, is it a sophisticated organization with great leadership and great talent and great capability up to something that sends a shiver up your spine? And if not, go look at another one. You want to know some great ones? Look at Crisis Text Line right in New York. That is turning the whole issue of mental health crisis on its ear. Look at One Love Foundation, which is teaching kids how to have healthy relationships.
Two of my favorites right there.
Yeah, look at No Kid Hungry. Look at Last Mile Health, which is training community health workers all over the world. Look at the Bail Project in New York, which has come up with this great innovation so that indigent people don't end up in jail for 3 weeks because they can't afford bail. Those are some, look at One Acre Fund. Look at Charity Water. These are incredible organizations that are like firing on all cylinders and have an entrepreneurial spirit and are really going for it. And I don't know what any of their overhead is, and I don't care. That's not what I ask about. Don't ask about it. Do you ask Elon Musk what's your overhead? Do you ask Apple when you go into the store, what's the overhead on the iPhone? No, stop that. Stop it.
So how about when it comes to like a smaller organization that maybe is addressing a more local or niche issue that doesn't have like such a grand goal of colonizing Mars or
find out, are they effective at what they do? Go visit them, make a call before you donate. Say, I want to meet with the executive director or the development director. I want a tour of the facility. I want to find out what you're up to. I want to see what your goals are, because I want you to have goals. I don't, if you're a small local hunger charity, I don't want to know that your goal is to raise $100,000 a year. I want to know that your goal is something like, well, in this neighborhood, there are 700 families on any given night who are hungry. Within the next 5 years, we want to make sure that that number is zero. Even at the local level, you can have big goals.
And one of the things you do talk about in the book is the difference between acute issues and, making a difference now versus, planning for the long term and making a difference later. Both of those are necessary though, right? Like
both of those,
that we need to feed now, and then there's other things we need to solve the problem of systemic hunger.
Yeah. But even with respect to an acute problem, like a soup kitchen, go visit the soup kitchen. Do they have a friendly staff? Is the staff well trained? Do they serve hearty, nutritious soup? Do they bring people dignity? Or are they in a shambles? bringing down people's dignity, serving lousy food, clothes sporadically, treating people like crap. Like, those are the things you want to ask about. And the question, how low is your overhead, will not answer any of those things, you know?
Okay, so now, we find an organization that has goals. Is it also important that the goal be time constrained?
Yeah, I think it is. Otherwise, how else can you measure it? Okay, you serve the hungry people in this community and you want to achieve X goal. You know, there are 700 hungry families and you want that number to be 350. By when? Because if it's by the year 3000, that's of no use to any of us.
Right. Okay, and then you want to say, what progress are you making? And you did go a little deeper into that issue when you talked about Jonas Salk and kind of the dilemma there. It's okay if a charity's not making any progress. That's one thing that I feel charities are sometimes too harshly judged on, is if they're not making progress. You know, like you've said, like Jonas Salk, if you asked him if he'd cured polio yet, up until the day he cured it, he wouldn't be able to tell you that he made any progress.
Exactly, yeah. But, you know, is there a spirit of curiosity there? Like, can you tell that they're grappling with a very difficult problem and they're working that problem really hard? You know, like if you went to Grumman in the 1960s, they were building the lunar module for Apollo, you would see failure after failure after failure, rejection after rejection after rejection by NASA of the different lunar modules because of quality control issues. But you would see, man, Grumman was working it. You know, they were working late hours. It was a hard problem to figure out how to build that lunar module, but they weren't lazy about it, you know?
And then you asked, how do you know if you're improving? How do you know if you're improving? If maybe you're not making any progress, or you're making different progress, or you go down a road and you maybe find something that, you know, you're looking for a cure for cancer and you discover a cure for heart disease. Like, how do you know if an organization is able to tell if they're improving?
Yeah, look, at some level, this involves you trusting, but that means you need to go visit them, and you know, because the only way you can develop trust is to meet the people who are doing it. But we can draw an analogy to medical research. How do they know if they're making progress? Well, they do experiments, and some of the experiments succeed, and some of the experiments fail. And they make notes on all of their experiments, and they gather data on all of their experiments. And experiment number 2 builds on the lessons from experiment number 1. Is the homeless charity that you love that says they want to end homelessness, what data do they gather about the programs that they run to try to end homelessness? And how do they know whether those programs are effective or not? How do they know how to improve them? You know, is there an interest in measuring the success of the program? Because if there isn't an interest in measuring success and failure, there's no conceivable way to progress.
Now, I will say, and I'm going to say this rhetorically, but this sounds like a lot of work, Dan. And, you know, I'm busy. I got a job. I got a wife and kids. I get home late from work. It's all I can do to have an hour with my son before we put him to bed. And then I cook dinner. And before I know it, it's 10 o'clock. Like, how am I supposed to have time to really do all this that you're saying, to, you know, go visit my charity and investigate the work they do and ask them these questions? Like, isn't there just like an easier way?
You know, part of the problem with our society is we've tried to figure out the easy way. Like, what's the easy way to build a great society? And look what we have.
Yep.
So, you know, being a good citizen means doing a little homework. Now, you don't have to do it tonight when you get home from work. You don't have to do it tomorrow night. And I lay this out in the book. You can do it over the course of a year. You can make it a family project so that your children and everyone in the family becomes involved in citizenship and understanding how to make a difference. And you decide together, you know, what's our family's cause that we really care about? Or what's my cause for life? And let's take the next month And each of us will look at some of the organizations that are doing that, and we'll pick 5 of them. And then the next month, we'll do a family phone call with each of them. So it becomes a family project. And then the next month, we'll decide on the one that we're going to support. And then we'll do a year's worth of giving. And then we'll take a look at it a year later. Look, when you're going to buy a new car or a new computer, you put time and effort into it. When you're going to vote for president, look at the amount of time you put into watching debates and reading issues and debating it with your friends. You can put time in. It's your money. You know, you're buying a better world. What better thing to put time into a purchase on?
I agree. How do we get more people to think that way? We need to invest in an advertising campaign to get that message out.
We need everyone to read the Everyday Philanthropist for starters.
We sure do.
That's what we need for starters, and then grow circles from there.
What do you say to the people who say, well, look, you know, we need these, if we're going to cure cancer, there needs to be it's going to be a for-profit company that cures cancer. It's not going to be a nonprofit company. There needs to be a profit motive. It's all like, you know, doing well by doing good. You know, companies that have, we need to have a profit motive to end hunger. It needs to be a for-profit business.
Well, I think, first of all, I don't hear a lot of people saying that. I don't hear a lot of people. I mean, there are some people, social enterprise people, who will say that type of thing. But look, not everything can be monetized, you know. And so you need philanthropy to bring comfort to the least among us and to bring aid to the least among us. If you want to solve 95% of the world's problems, business can probably do it. But 5% of 7 billion people is 350 million people, and I don't think we want to leave them behind. But if we really want a world, like Bucky Fuller said, that works for everyone with no one and nothing left out, then a strong nonprofit sector is going to have to be a big part of it.
I just want to cut in here for a second. I do all these interviews while I walk. As you know, last time we did this, we were walking in Topsfield, Massachusetts. And part of the reason I do that is I want people to hear the environment of what's going on around. And so with the coronavirus, obviously can't be in person, but I've been doing them on Zoom, and I'm walking right now, as people can probably hear. And you might hear helicopters overhead and some sirens around me. I am on 3rd Avenue in New York City, and this is where the protests are going to be coming up right about now. And so there's some police coming out, blocking off the street. Fortunately, around here, all the protests have been peaceful, which is very good, as I think most of the protests are. And but every day around now, we get people marching up the street to protest. So that might be coming through soon. I'll try to find a quieter place to walk and do the last part of this recording. But just want to share that with people. It's a little piece of history on the podcast in the environment. Let me just go back to your book for a sec now that I regain some of my thoughts there. We talked about the overhead. There's a whole bunch in the book about, why overhead is not the right measure. Why charity?
Well, I think a lot of people think that if I want to really make a difference, I go into politics. That's where real social change happens. And the truth is, there's an enormous amount of change being initiated by really smart, innovative nonprofit organizations who are leading government or who are doing things that government just never got it together to do. So the nonprofit sector is a big, big way, if you pick the right organization, that you can make a difference without ever running for office. Vote. Yes, everybody should vote, but and people who are so inclined and want to run for office should do that. But you can make a big difference by contributing to the nonprofit sector and allying yourself. Become friends with a nonprofit organization, the way you become friends with your PTA, or the way you become friends with at the local bakery. Become friends with a nonprofit organization. Make them part of your lifestyle family, and get to know them over a long period of time and support them. Charity is we're not going to be able to get the world that we all dream of with government alone.
Well, could we maybe, some people would say, look at Sweden, or look at, countries that have a stronger social, civic system that, they fund their healthcare system with the government. They don't rely on charity to fund their healthcare system.
Yeah, well, we don't rely on charity to fund our healthcare system really either, although, we do have free medical clinics and things like that. And certainly that would be an important step for the United States. But, I've spoken in all the places, whether it's in Ireland or the UK or Canada. There are big nonprofit sectors there too, and there's a lot of human suffering in those countries as well. There are high levels of poverty, and there are high levels of hunger and domestic violence and illiteracy. Not so much in Ireland. And so, even if you have strong government programs, if you really want a society where everyone has opportunity, you've got to attack it from a number of different perspectives. And I think that this is something that, we have to start to talk in our country about innovation and about creativity. Venture into politics for a minute. I'm frankly tired of listening to candidates tell me that they're the more moral candidate. I don't give a damn about that. I just assume that there's a level of morality everywhere, that we'd all would like to see a better world. What new ideas do you have to bring to the table? What track record do you have at developing those ideas? You look at the need for innovation in America. There should be a 1-800-AMERICA number. You got an issue with your taxes or with veteran services, or you're a farmer who needs some help. You shouldn't have to spend a week researching where to call to get government assistance. Call 1-800-AMERICA, and there's a friendly person on the other end of the phone to help you. We need to start to blueprint the world that we want to live in and show it to people so they get excited about it. The way Walt Disney used to show people every Sunday night on the wonderful world of Disney. Here's what Disney World's going to look like. It's going to have Epcot, and it's going to have these lakes, and it's going to have these hotels. It's going to be amazing. And you just got so excited about Disney World. We need to start to get excited about World instead of this just heavy guilt laid on us about how, we must do this. It's our moral responsibility to do this. How about it would be joyful? It would be cool. It would be incredible to have a world that works for everyone, and everyone would prosper. Can we start communicating in that way? And can we start talking creatively about what kind of ideas will do that? How does a new invention of higher education integrate with universal basic income, innovate with a reform of the bail system, innovate with new ideas in policing? How does this all come together to create like a magical world that we're jumping up and down about, the way you jump up and down when you drive a Tesla?
Well, you got me excited.
Yeah, well, we need more of that instead of all this goddamn doom and gloom all the time and heavy guilt laid all over us. Like, let's create an incredible world. Let's build a project together to make an incredible America, and like new ideas for philanthropy. How can we engage philanthropy in this endeavor to build an incredible society?
So the people listening to this right now are charity milers, most likely. They're obviously people that care very much about philanthropy, but I'm always surprised when I get people. It's like, I have a charity that you should add to the app. They only spend 10% on overhead. They're a great charity. So it's amazing to me that because you've been out there preaching this for a long time, and you wrote a book about it a number of years ago. You have one of the most watched TED Talks on this topic. I would think that this idea is out there by now. What do we need to do to get this idea out?
Look, the idea of gay marriage was out there in 1890, but it took 100 years to make it actually happen. Civil rights, right, was out there. Martin Luther King, 1965, and look at where we are today. Sadly, things take time, and this is a relatively new conversation. You know how you got to listen to a Pink Floyd song 98 times before you actually get what it's about. So, but we can accelerate it. And look, just for the people who are listening to right now, if there's one thing you remember from having listened to this podcast today, like 10 years from now, I want you to remember, I listened to this podcast one day. It was in 2020. It was in the spring of 2020, summer of 2020. And I remember this one thing that this guy said, which was, stop asking your charities what their overhead is. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Don't do that anymore. It's bad for them. It's bad for you. It's bad for the people that they serve. You've got to start to ask new questions. There, so we handled that audience for today.
All right. Well, I'd actually like charities to start spending more on overhead. One of the really, not for the just for the reasons that you said, but I think it would be amazing if, we've got 40 million people out of work, if charities became the next job creators.
Yeah, well, there are 10 million people employed in the nonprofit sector in America. It's a big job to make a better world. And if we could fund it, we would have a lot more jobs there as well. That's a great way to transfer wealth,
I mean, overhead is salary. Overhead is somebody's salary.
Absolutely.
I'd rather have somebody going to feed people and build houses and do all the other stuff that we need than making pop sockets for your phone.
Right, exactly.
All right, that's my rant. I pick on pop sockets a lot because I can't think of anything that we need less than something to help us hold our iPhone. I'd like, people, sorry, pop sockets, if you're listening. I would want charities to be the next big job creators. All right, Dan. Well, thank you very much. One more time, where can people get the Everyday Philanthropist?
Just remember that name, the Everyday Philanthropist. You can get it on Amazon, or you can go to danpallotta.com. Really, really appreciate you for everything that you do, for leading the charge in so many ways on these important issues, and for taking the time to share this with us. Thank you very much, Dan. All right. Thank you, Gene. And thanks to everyone else for joining us. Hopefully you are as fired up by Dan as I am. Every mile matters.